Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Joseph Thompson, CEO of AIDTech. Joseph, welcome.
Thanks, Max. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. You know, we knew you from years ago. You started doing projects and funding projects on the old Start Join.
Exactly. That's where I first met you.
Yeah. Now you've got AIDTech. So what is AIDTech? Tell the people.
Sure. So what AIDTech is an organization that we saw there's fintech, regtech, legal tech, but there's no industry for transparency. So it all started by mistaking the Sahara Desert, from being honest. So I ran an event in 2009 called the Marathon des Sables. So it's a 151-mile race, 6 marathons in 6 days in the Sahara Desert. I raised over $100,000. I gave it to a charity. I followed up that charity about 9 months later to see two things: what's the impact and where the money has gone, and it all went missing. There was no traceability. So I became a skeptic. I didn't believe in organizations, NGOs, charities. And then I came across, actually, it was yourself and Bitcoin on YouTube. And then further down the line, 2013, I'm understanding what the value of blockchain is. Not so much Bitcoin, but blockchain. And then I said, if we could create a situation where people could actually have transparency on aid, welfare, remittances, donations. So we said, let's create a company that represents an industry, and that's how AIDTech was born.
All right, so walk us through how it works a little bit. How do you use blockchain to bring transparency to aid? Sure,
so we said to create, it's an education piece that's needed in blockchain, first of all. So when we're dealing with NGOs and governments, we had to make it very, very simple. So we were the first company in the world to deliver international aid to Syrian refugees on the border with Lebanon and Syria in December 2015. And essentially what we decided was, if you want to have impact and see where your money is going, you need to give a person an identity. So we viewed the blockchain as giving a person a legal identity. So that identity becomes, it's like your credit card and your driver's license becoming one. So if you can think of a person's ID on the blockchain as a gateway, and now organizations have traceability if they're sending them value in Bitcoin or Ethereum, whatever it may be, but even having digital assets represented on the blockchain to make sure they actually reach that end recipient. So we started with aid initially, and we've gone into remittances, donations, and the big play is actually banks coming to us for corporate donations, believe it or not. So,
right. So in other words, people would give money to an organization, an NGO, then they are responsible to distributing it to recipients, and you found that you could disintermediate that middleman and just deliver aid directly to individuals, more or less.
It's in between, and what we decided to use aid organizations and NGOs, but as the distribution network, because they have the data on the end beneficiaries, they are basically the trusted custodians. So we actually say, hey, we can actually generate more revenue for you as an aid organization, as an NGO, as a government. You have better targeting, you have better data, but you know the impact is going directly to an end beneficiary. So donors, consumers and donors, or even on the corporate side, we actually work with the NGOs and aid organizations to deliver exactly where that money should go.
Right, and how has it shaken up the aid business if at this juncture? Has there been some changes? Have things are moving? What's going on there?
Yeah, so if we look back, Ban Ki-moon, the former head of the United Nations, said on average 30% of international aid is lost. So that could be fraud or corruption, but also
30% of international aid is lost?
Well, it lost through the corruption, or it's also inefficiency in humans, right? So, you know, as you say, you can't defraud mathematics. So by using the blockchain, you guarantee something gets from point A to point B. We're working with multiple NGOs internationally, and if you're aware of the new Millennium Goals, they're called United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I was very fortunately announced as the UN SDG pioneer for blockchain last year at the General Assembly in New York. So all the different UN organizations, the Red Crosses, and so on, are actually looking at using blockchain for better transparency, because all governments, 190 odd governments, have been signed up to the SDGs, and they're all being measured on their impact. How are they achieving these sustainable development goals? So we're saying, okay, if you put all your aid and welfare delivery, whatever it may be, on the blockchain, you have much greater transparency, but the benefits of using that with big data for predictive analysis and so on.
So talk a little bit about digital identity.
Sure.
So how does it work? And talk us, because it's a hot topic here at the MoneyConf in Dublin. Digital identity is one of the biggest topics here. It's a huge topic in the fintech space and the crypto space. So what's going on there?
If I refer back to the Sustainable Development Goals, it says, Goal 16.9 says everybody has to have a legal identity by 2030. So currently there's 1.1 billion people without an identity right now. So we viewed identity is the gateway to accessing all these different services. So if you can imagine an iPhone, entry point for an iPhone is $900, $1,000. If you have an Apple iPhone, you have an Apple ID, but there's 190 billion app downloads. Now, if you have an identity by itself, it's not really of any value. But if you have an identity that acts as a gateway for you receiving aid, remittances, donations, and the way we propose it, and we've built out a platform, is to say the end beneficiary should manage their own data. So, for example, we are doing a project now where we're delivering antenatal care to women in Tanzania, and we're going to have the first child born on the blockchain this week in Tanzania.
What do you mean you're having the first child born on the blockchain?
Yeah,
Talk us through that a little bit.
Sure, yeah. So we're doing a project with a Dutch organisation, and they're delivering medical care to pregnant women, so pre and postnatal care. And what we're saying there is, instead of it being a paper process, it's a digital process. So a woman now has her identity on the blockchain, which can be as simple as a plastic card with a QR code. So the NGO and the local health centre know when she receives her medical entitlements. Now, when her child is born on the blockchain, she's able to receive medicine for her child. So if you think about this, what this means in the future, a person born now that has an identity on the blockchain, and as they're receiving aid, remittances, donations, whatever it may be, they're building a data credit profile based on their own identity, where they control their own data. So blockchain is giving you this ability to flip traditional business models on its head, where the end beneficiary has a lot more power and say. So now this mother has an identity, she's controlling what entitlement she gets for her child, and that's building a credit profile for that child on the blockchain.
Known you for a number of years. We met in Ireland at the Kilkenomics Festival.
Correct.
I know that you are a guy who cares deeply about this technology, and this project is a humanitarian project. You're working with the UN. But let's talk about digital ID for a second, because there is kind of a flip side to this, and get your thoughts. When you hear reports out of China, for example, that they're going to put everyone's ID essentially into a huge database, and it becomes a social score, and if you say something against the government, your social score gets debited, and then you can't take an airplane, you can't get on a flight. Okay, they're using this huge database and identity-based data, and it's to an extent that folks would argue is a negative. Let's just call it that. So. What are your thoughts on that, just broadly speaking?
You don't need blockchain for that. It's not going to be a blockchain-based identity in the first place. So the idea of an identity, a digital identity, it's going to change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, in my opinion. And it goes back to the idea, if you have an identity, it has to be a gateway to access all these different services. So we're not just doing aid delivery, we're doing donations and welfare delivery and so on. That decision of how a person should donate money or value is that person's decision. When it comes to the level of government control over a person's identity and what they may see, it's not really blockchain-based. It's not blockchain-based at all, let's be honest. So when you're up against governments and using their own identity system, I think it's very, very different means for what we're trying to do.
Right, so make a distinction there. So you're saying it's not blockchain-based, and you're saying it's not blockchain at all in China because it's a huge database. I mean,
Exactly.
It's just you don't need a blockchain to do it. It's not blockchain-enabled. It's just a huge database that they're tracking. But blockchain and Bitcoin is a huge database. It's updated every 10 minutes through proof of work, and that's the magic of Bitcoin, is that it takes a database technology and combines it with encryption technology and proof of work technology, and you create something very, very special. But let me just understand what you're saying here. So you're saying on a territorial basis and on a region-to-region basis, you can't control the politics in any country.
Correct.
But AIDTech, it doesn't stop AIDTech from the mission of getting aid to where it's needed, and that's your focus.
Exactly. It's initially started off with aid, but going across borders, so driving down the fees of remittances, welfare delivery, working with organisations in the UK, and we have a consumer app where donors can actually make a donation to people across the world, but the donor has say and where the actually money goes to their beneficiary. Now, if a government has an identity that's not blockchain-based, it's obviously not going to be compatible, right? Because they have their own reasons for doing that, and in different countries, you're dead right, it does change. You don't need blockchain for that.
Politics in various countries, that's been there before, it's there now, it'll be there continuing, but this technology, you're using it in this interesting way. Now, let's talk about the money raising. You're here at the conference, I think you've just closed a round of financing, or you've got a round, what's going on there?
Yeah, so when you do something that's never been done before and try and create a new industry, going to investors is a slow process. So we're very lucky to have been backed by Techstars, a tech accelerator, infamous angel investor Jason Calacanis. We spent 14 weeks in Silicon Valley, and it's a new world delivering.
Jason Calacanis is in?
He's in, yeah.
Oh, he's a good friend of ours. And I know him back from the dot-com days.
Yeah, we won IBM's Company of the Year last year, and he was the judge, so he brought us over to Silicon Valley, which was great. And we won a lot of awards. We won MasterCard's Company of the Year, and Christine Lagarde at the IMF gave us Game Changer of the Year award for fighting corruption, which is pretty fantastic. But yeah, so the announcement today was we're the first blockchain company in the world to have investment from not one but by two governments. So Enterprise Ireland, the investment arm of the Irish government, and SG Innovate, the Singaporean government investment arm, have come in. And it sends a massive signal to the market to have two governments to actually back an organisation. We're using blockchain, and essentially going forward, governments are going to be our paying customers. So yeah, we're absolutely thrilled. It's been we actually have some money coming in from China. We have some money coming in from Holland as well, from impact investors. So yeah, we're thrilled.
Right. So this is, I guess, part of the kind of an Irish entrepreneurial success story, right? I mean, you're an Irish guy, and you know, this is a great nod to this entrepreneurial spirit of Ireland. Is there a growing startup scene in Ireland?
Yeah, no, absolutely is. And I think it stems from things like these great events where you have the Web Summit from Cosgrove, and you have organisations like Stripe, the Carlson Brothers. So, you know, we've a couple of announcements coming over in the next few weeks, which I think is really going to put the spotlight in Ireland. And if we pull this off with the backing of the government here, I think the whole crypto space and the blockchain space is going to be focusing in on Ireland, and Ireland trying to be represented as this blockchain/crypto hub globally. You know, we're speaking with the central bank, we're speaking with the Department of Finance, Department of Revenue, and yeah, so watch this space. It's going to be exciting. But Enterprise Ireland, I have to admit, have been fantastic, because a lot of governments wouldn't back, even a lot of investors wouldn't back an organisation doing something so new. So when you bring in blockchain or crypto and you put the government behind it, there's a lot of conversations, a lot of education there that's needed. But to the fairness in the Singapore government, they have prevailed, and they've given us a lot of patience.
Right. So just the nuts and bolts of the startups. What's the head count now? How many people are working at AIDTech?
So we're 7 today. We actually going to do
7?
That's it. That's impressive.
That's very
efficient. It's our
you plus 6 more?
It's the dev team are phenomenal.
What? And you've got 2 governments backing you?
Yes.
Or you're a leprechaun. You're a magical Irish leprechaun, or something's going on here.
We go with unicorn.
Oh, the unicorn. He could be changing. Remember the Celtic tiger?
He's well dead, so let's not talk about him. But no, we're actually going to increase the headcount up to about 60 people by Christmas. So we actually sent out 7 job offers yesterday, and as an Irish story, it's all about employment. Economics all about employment, so we're looking to scale that team rapidly. So
that's a massive growth in a short period of time. So your skills as a CEO, is this your first CEO gig?
Second, my first one was a failed company, so.
Right, but failure is the gateway to success.
Absolutely.
But that's not a European concept, though. There's a stigma attached to failure in Europe that prevents entrepreneurialism. Would you agree with that statement?
100%. I think Europeans are a lot more risk adverse than, say, in the US.
And they need to get over that.
They do, and I think that's why you have a lot more unicorns coming from the US than you would have Europe.
Excellent point. That's going to do it. Thanks so much. Joseph Thompson, CEO of AIDTech. Been a pleasure. See you soon, hopefully.
You will indeed. Cheers. Thank you.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Joseph Thompson, CEO of AIDTech. If you want to catch us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.